All right, hey everyone. My name is Alex. I work at Across. We are a cross-chain bridge. We have focused on value transfer between Ethereum L2s. Today, I really want to give you a high-level overview of what Across is, our technical architecture, and then how you can build with Across in your own dApps. So this is probably something you've heard and seen a lot before from other teams, but we are really focused on providing cheap, fast, secure interop, so seamless you don't know you're using blockchain. And how we're really trying to do this is through the infrastructure layer, by being able to transfer value between chains in less than 2 seconds. We also transfer value for very cheap, but we really are focused on this speed component because we think it's incredibly important for UX user experience. It's, if your transactions are taking 10 minutes to go between different chains, there's only so much you can do, abstracting away the complexity with wallets and everything. So we really are trying to get this amount of time down between to 2 to 3 seconds to transfer value between chains. So before I get into kind of our implementation of this, I do want to address kind of like the past. A lot of people are probably familiar with bridges, and a lot of these bridges are message-based. And we've seen countless bridge hacks. We've seen how expensive cross-chain messaging can be. But most important is just how slow some of these bridge transactions can be with message-based protocols. So we've really focused on this alternative called cross-chain intents. And at Across, you can kind of think of it as 3 layers. We have the intent layer, we have the solver layer, and then the settlement layer. So this intent layer is just really the user articulating what they want done. A vast majority of these intents are just transferring value on ETH from blockchain A to blockchain B. But over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a lot more demand for more sophisticated actions, such as doing a bridge plus swap, doing a bridge plus a mint, or purchasing an NFT, and then also doing a bridge plus deposit. Pretty much, there are other use cases, but these are really the 3 buckets that we've seen the most of is swapping, minting, or depositing. And so under that, after a user articulates, what they want to be done, I put an X out for it. We don't pass a message between, blockchain A or blockchain B. Instead, we have these sophisticated actors called solvers or relayers. And they basically watch all the chains that Across supports. When they see a user wanting to transfer value from one chain to another, they take their own funds and then front that capital to the user on blockchain B. So after they do that, the user is happy. They've received their capital, or they've received their ETH on blockchain B in 2 or 3 seconds. However, their funds are still locked up in an escrow contract on blockchain A. So what we do is we use the UMA optimistic oracle to essentially verify that the intent was fulfilled accurately and issue a repayment every 60 minutes or so. So essentially how that works is we propose these repayments. It goes through a challenge period, and if nobody disputes, those repayments are issued to the solver. So why this works great is the user that wants their funds transferred from blockchain A to blockchain B, that's done in a few seconds. And then the solver is able to be repaid along with a small fee, and then reuse that capital for fulfilling more intents. And right now we have about 30 or 40 solvers in our ecosystem fulfilling these intents on behalf of the users. So at a high level, what is this, what is this architecture and system done? So we've We've done over $13 billion of volume. Our average cost is under 4 cents, and our median fill time is under 3 seconds. So this is a huge improvement to what we were seeing in the past few years with being able to transfer value across chains. You can now, if you're a dApp, building a cross-chain user experience, you can now have that value transferred in about 3 seconds for pennies. So up until this point, a lot of our volume has come from aggregators or even our own front end. And so we've really focused these last 6 to 12 months on making it easier for dApp builders to leverage Across' infrastructure in their own dApps. And this is not intentional, but basically we've kind of created 3 integration options. One is just creating a separate bridge UI in their dApp. I think that this is an improvement over possibly forwarding users to a separate bridge UI or a widget, because you have a lot of flexibility in that onboarding experience. If you're like a poly market that only deals with USDC, you don't have to have all the bridge asset options. You can just make that onboarding experience super seamless. We've also seen other dApps want to charge fees or just have more control over the integration experience. The second bucket is just cross-chain actions, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's basically allowing a bridge plus action, so whether that is a deposit, a swap, and that's been a really appealing option for a lot of apps that want a really seamless cross-chain user experience. And then the last one I put on here, I think is worth mentioning, is we also have a lot of teams that maybe are curious with how much transaction volume will come from like a bridge UI or cross-chain actions. So they'll use like a link out, and we have custom URL parameters that pre-populate things like the chains and the assets. And then once they get more feedback on how much usage that's used, a lot of teams have actually come back to us and said, we want to invest more, develop resources, and building a more custom user experience. So I'll just run through these real quick, but this is kind of like just get a sense of what this is a team called dApp. They built a bridge UI. This is that cross-chain actions experience. So as you can see, like this is a team called YieldNest. All their contracts are on mainnet, and they basically allow the user to select ETH on any chain and do a bridge plus deposit. I think like if you go through this UX, the big takeaway is whether you're interacting with YieldNest contracts on mainnet or Arbitrum or Base, it's all the same user experience. So I think a huge advantage of this is you no longer requiring users to know which chain the contracts are on and get their funds there. You can do all this in the same UI. And then this is just a link out option that some teams have done, just forwarding users to our bridge UI. So now let's get into more of this SDK we built and kind of the developer experience if you want to leverage Across in your own dApp. Basically, we've had teams integrate over the past 6 to 12 months. We've just taken all that feedback and incorporated it into this SDK. Some of the features worth mentioning: we've made sure that the SDK is compatible with Ethers or VM. A lot of teams don't want to manage like all these configurations for tokens and chains and routes, so we've made that really easy to do. We include like logos for the chains and the tokens and all that stuff, so it makes it really easy to add new chains. We've made it seamless to include cross-chain transactions, and I think another big one is just like you don't have to worry about approvals or some of the manual stuff before. If the user doesn't have an allowance on the Across contract, approval is prompted before the actual bridge transaction. And then the last thing, we've added tenderly simulations, but also sometimes status between, like being able to identify the status of transactions on different chains can be challenging. So we've worked hard in making that very easy for integrations to know when a deposit on blockchain A is made, and being able to know when it's filled on a different chain. So here is here is our SDK. It's a little small. Yeah, so here's kind of like the repo that we've used for teams wanting to integrate the Across SDK. On the right, we have basically this example UI that or front end that has an example bridge transaction, and then we also have this bridge plus action. And on the left, we just kind of have like the documents. Like, I just want to go through like the core components of like what an integration would deal with when you're going through to integrate Across in your front end. The setting up the Across client is pretty simple, straightforward. You're basically including all the chains that you want to integrate with. I think it's a nice option. You don't have to include all of the chains that Across supports if you don't want to. But if you did, you would include all those chains in this chains array. And then this integration ID, this is an identifier that's appended to the transaction call data. I think for integrations, looking to integrate Across, one thing that we do is we have a large data team, and we also have a lot of infrastructure for monitoring transactions. So if something does look off, like you're charging too high of fees or something, by having this identifier, it's nice that we can reach out to you and let you know before there's more issues involved. So that's a nice little feature we have. And now kind of getting into the meat of it, like for doing a bridge transaction. So the first step is basically just receiving a quote. So there's basically 5 parameters you need. And in this bridge UI, you can see these are, you need the chain ID from the source chain and the destination chain, and then the input token and the output token. So in the example on the right, we're going from, well, I guess we'll do Arbitrum to Optimism to match this example. And if we're transferring ETH to ETH, this is basically all you would need to collect from the user to be able to get a quote from Across. And then the last thing is just the input amount. So with these parameters, you can get a quote, and along with the actual transaction values that are used, we also populate in the response a lot of things like the expected fill time, the expected amount that you're receiving on the destination chain. So it makes it really easy to show a lot of the on your front end, a lot of the user information, or the information that's important to users, so that they can be more informed before doing a transaction. Or you can pretty much abstract away the whole experience, and you don't have to include much at all. It's really up to the integration. And then after you get that quote, it's really including, it's calling this execute quote function. You just need to pass a wallet client. You use the deposit object from the quote here. And then we have this on progress callback, which basically makes it really easy to track the transactions. It'll give you information on the approval, the deposit, and the fill. And for like a simple bridge transaction, that's really all you need. So this is very straightforward in terms of functionality. There are some UI components where the SDK also helps, but from functionality, it's about as straightforward as it gets. And I think cross-chain transactions can seem a little bit more intimidating, but I just want to highlight like how little work it's actually involved in doing an action after the bridge transaction. So this is a bridge. This is like our example where we're bridging and then we're staking into. This is about the simplest contract you'll ever see, but you pretty much have 2 functions, stake and unstake. So what we're doing here is we're bridging from Arbitrum to Optimism, and then we're staking into this contract. And yeah, so kind of going through this, you just really need to provide two values. You have your fallback recipient, and this is the address that's used if anything were to go wrong. Like if any of these transactions were to revert, our fallback scenario is basically those funds that are received on the destination chain are just sent to the user. This fallback mechanism has been used by all integrations. I think it's very easy to implement. And yeah, we like for something like this, it's very rare that these transactions would revert. It's more so if you're doing like a bridge plus swap, and when slippage is involved, you might have some edge cases where those transactions would revert and those funds would be forwarded to the user address. And then the only other component of these cross-chain transactions is just there's this actions array where you can include basically transaction objects that you want to be executed after the bridge transaction. Without going through line by line, I mean, this is basically so you're receiving WETH, and this is unwrapping that WETH, and then staking the. So you're receiving, you have ETH, and then you're staking that ETH in this contract. So this is a very simple example, but you can really include as many transactions as you want in here, and it's very flexible. So a lot of times we get questions like what about my use case? How can I use this for something like the dApp is more geared towards? So like this is just an example of if you were wanting to do a deposit into an ETH pool, what you would need to change. This is pretty much, you would just need to, let's assume that like the address or the chains and the route information is the same. The only thing you would really need to change here is this cross-chain message. And instead of doing like this unwrap and staking into this contract on Optimism, instead you would just do an approval on the Aave contract, and then you would, here's like the function that basically generates the deposit call data. So you can see like in this stake function, it's the only argument is this user address, and it's calling stake. To adapt this to something with Aave, I mean, you would just include their supply function and the arguments that are unique to that function. And so yeah, I mean, like I use this a lot when teams are interested in how this would work with their use case. Oftentimes it takes less than 15 minutes to kind of adjust this and send a transaction to them. So if you are curious in terms of like how Across can be used for your use case, feel free to contact me or anyone on our team, and we can kind of work through what an example would look like. And I'm part of the integration team. We have a lot of other support, and we love to kind of work with teams and help them as they go through the integration process. So feel free to reach out or let me know if anyone has any questions.